Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello, girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's mindset and body image coach. Today, I'm joined by the lovely Nicole Groman, who is a nutrition specialist, and her passion is helping to build a healthy relationship with food and embrace your body. Now, she's here to chat all things about how to guide you through breaking free from diets for good and adopting lasting balance habits. And we're also going to be covering some of the common challenges that people think that certain foods are off, which leads them to restriction, leads them to a disconnection between their mind and their body. So stay tuned, because this is an episode that you do not want to miss. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm really, really excited. And even just like that introduction was so spot on. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to talk about all of this today. I'm pumped. Yeah.
It's literally your bread and butter. And this is something that I am so passionate as well about, teaching women that there's just no one way of eating or doing life. And I would love for us to start with, what are some key milestones in your own food journey that led you to your current role?
Yeah. So it's one thing that I think is a little funny or different about my current role is that I didn't heal my relationship with food before I applied to graduate school. I didn't even know I had a broken relationship with food before I applied to graduate school. To become a dietitian. I was a psychology major, which I absolutely loved. Funny little fact is that I was deciding between psych and nutrition, but didn't feel like taking the biochem. I was like, I don't want to do that. So I just decided to take psychology instead. And honestly was absolutely in love with that major. And it's cool because I'm not a licensed, therapist. And I want to make that clear for like scope of practice. Like, I'm a registered dietitian, but having a psych background is amazing because there's so much like that human connection work that I do at my current role. So I just love that I have that background. But I started working in a gym after college just because I didn't know what else I wanted to do and was trying to figuring out next steps, and got really wrapped up in fitness culture, learning a lot about nutrition, but in an unhealthy way, which like at the time I really didn't know. And I think that this is one of the things that so many people who do struggle with their relationship with food can relate to, that a lot of what was disordered for me was actually normalized and still is normalized by society. Like, I was following the cheat day plan, which was introduced to me from being in fitness culture. And like 5 to 6 days a week, I would eat really clean. And like 1 to 2 days a week, I would essentially binge. I just didn't know that's what I was doing. And throughout all of this, I just became really interested in nutrition, but like, again, in an unhealthy, obsessive way that I didn't know was going on. But this is what led me to want to become a dietitian. I at the time was working in the clienteling space at the gym. I ran the retail store and had so many amazing relationships with customers. I'm like, how can I do both? How can I talk about food and continue building relationships with people? Let me become a dietitian. And that's how it happened. But then about halfway through my schooling, it started to really click for me that I just didn't think and feel about food the same way that I used to in my life. I'm like, it just doesn't feel right. And I reached out to a therapist and we started working together. And then she sent me to a dietitian. So I had the team of like therapist and dietitian, and healed. And the way that I always envision it, I pictured like going through a car wash. Like, I went in one way and then popped out on the other side as a dietitian who's now going to practice intuitive eating and the weight neutral approach. Like, it wasn't a conscious decision. It was just, I can't do it any other way. I couldn't do it any other way. And I knew that I wanted to help people who struggle the way that I used to.
I'm so relieved that you said that when you were studying nutrition and psychology, you were in the midst of it, because too often people are scared to actually admit what they're experiencing or that they have an eating issue, or as you mentioned, not even realizing that they do have the problem till they connect the dots. And this is such a similar story to myself. When I first started in the fitness and health industry, I did have an eating disorder as well. Yet I was so oblivious to it till I did my own work as well and realized, oh, okay, I need to not fix myself. I need to heal the relationship that I have with food right now so I can, better serve my clients. So it's interesting that we're talking about this because you also mentioned that there was a point where you didn't even know there was an issue.
Right. Right. And I think that so many people don't, because, unless it is one of the well-known quote unquote eating disorders, and I don't know why I said quote unquote, I think because there's such a spectrum of disordered eating that, like, I said quotes because people typically think of like anorexia nervosa or bulimia nervosa, sometimes binge eating too, but there's so much more. It's a spectrum. And I think that a lot of people in our society do have, like, our society has a disordered relationship with food. Like when you hear the way that it's spoken about in movies, on TV, and I say commercials, although like we're streaming, we don't see commercials so much anymore, but like just the media, right? Speaks about food and body in a really disordered way. We have to earn the food at the gym or compensate for what we ate. And if I say that, somebody might be like, that's normal. What are you talking about? Like, well, actually, it's not. I mean, it's normal because it's typical and normalized, but it's not healthy. And, being bad for eating the donuts or the cookies, like all this language, normal because it's normalized, but not healthy. So and the reason it's not healthy, just in case anybody's like, well, why? Is because it really is setting someone up to have this kind of conditional relationship with food. Like, I can't eat this, or I'm bad for eating this. Or again, if I do, now I need to go make it up somehow by restricting tomorrow or going to the gym. A lot of value judgment associated with food. So yeah, I didn't know, because what I was doing, I'm like, I just eat healthy. What are you talking about? Like, I don't eat sugar during the week, and I only eat whole grain, and I eat limited salt. All these things are surface level healthy, but caused a very unhealthy relationship with food and my body, where it's like a lot of guilt and shame, and poor body image.
And there's such a connection between food and the body. And too often people don't realize the connection between the two. And I would love to know, now that we have a better understanding of, some of the key turning points that you've experienced and what you're helping your clients with, is what inspired you to go down that route in specializing in helping women to achieve this healthy relationship with food, and also finding that body acceptance? Because I feel as if the self-acceptance piece is very big right now. Well, it has been for quite a while, but as you mentioned, it's more well spoken about because of social media.
Yeah. What I think that what inspired me to do this was purely my own experience. Like, it was, and I think before, like when I was saying it wasn't exactly a conscious choice, I think when you ask that question now, like that's really what I mean. That, it's funny, when I started practicing, I would get clients referred to me, like friends or like still from the fitness industry that I had just left. And it wouldn't be the client that I realized I really wanted to work with. Like, it would be somebody who's like, help me eat for weight loss, help me eat clean. And I would still take the client on because I was brand new. And like, well, when you're brand new, it's hard to turn away a client, but also unseasoned in the sense that I didn't realize that, like, if it's not the exact type of person that I want to help, I'm not going to be the best fit for them. So there were a couple people in the beginning who we parted ways sooner than later, because I'm like, what you want is not what I didn't even say ethically at the time. Like, now I know ethically because of how bad dieting is. Like, ethically, I would never encourage a diet, but it's just morally, ideologically, what these people wanted help with was not what I could even help them with. If I wasn't ingrained into my bones anymore. to say a food is good, a food is bad, to say you shouldn't eat this, that doing anything that took anybody away from listening to their body. And that's where some of the clients I was getting sent. So it just felt really wrong. It felt like such a wrong fit. And then I would work with people who were the right fit for me. One of my very first clients was somebody who was a chronic dieter, historically, just like me. I saw so much of myself in her. I understood so much of what she was struggling with because I had been through it too. And that was like, to this day, I, feel like she was one of the people who was one of the best fit clients. I've had so many more like her, but I just remember her being the first one, that was like, oh, this is what I want to do. So it was like knowing and feeling that fit that helped me further, specifically, quote unquote, niche down, as they say in the business industry. Like, that's how I ultimately ended up doing what I do.
It's such a beautiful way to see all of that. Not a transition. What's the word I'm looking for? The journey that you've been on through yourself, but how you've been able to lead other women this way as well, to just find more of a healthier way of looking at themselves, but also learning more about their relationship with food. And I would love for us to like debunk some of the myths are going around, social media and the normalizing standards around nutrition. And I know too often there's a lot of myths around intuitive eating in certain practices, and you may find that in your practice as well. And I would love for you to share why it's actually important for women to learn this type of practice.
Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest myths with intuitive eating is that it is not a health-based approach, because people believe that I am encouraging them to, eat only junk food, or like stop eating nutritious foods. Just eat whatever you want, whenever you want, all the time. And that, it's two things. Number one, not the case. Because of the way they're thinking about it, right? People envision that just means like I'm going to be eating every second of every day, all the time, and like only like fried foods and cookies and whatever. It does ultimately turn into eating what you want, when you want, all the time, but that looks incredibly different from what you think it's going to look like. Like, eating what you want when you want is actually going to lead you to a place where it's balanced, typically nutritious, in line with your physical hunger cues, not eating every second, which is maybe what you're imagining it's going to look like. And the reason that it's so important to, if somebody's thinking about pursuing intuitive eating, I would 100 times over say yes. Like, I would encourage you to do this and support you in this, because we have so much evidence to show that this is actually not only good for like body image and relationship with food, but health too. So, this kind of belief that intuitive eating isn't exactly a health-based approach is not true. So the benefits of it, so many people that I work with, and people who I think now are open to exploring intuitive eating because we're hearing more about it, like, I don't want to feel guilty about food anymore. I don't want to feel obsessed with what I eat. I think about food all the time. I just wish I could think about something else. When I'm done with my current meal, I'm thinking about my next meal or my last meal. Like, my body image is awful. It's impacted by what I eat, like all of these things. And intuitive eating is made for you if this is what you are struggling with. And we also see, so like with all of these benefits of improved body image, improved mental health, improved quality of life, reduced disordered eating behaviors, reduced binging, which surprises people because they think that once they give themselves permission to eat, they're going to binge all the time. We ultimately see reduced binging behavior with intuitive eating. We also see like physiological benefits, including healthy cholesterol and triglycerides, and improved blood glucose and insulin response, lower cardiovascular risk. So they're like just across the board reasons that I think it's like important and really beneficial to pursue this approach.
I love intuitive eating. I've been practicing it for so many years, and I unconsciously started it. I didn't know much about it till
Mm.
I pursued my further studies in eating psychology. And then I realized, oh, I'm actually intuitive eating right now. This is
Yeah.
crazy. But it's such a cool way that you've put it together where someone who is having those thoughts in their head going, oh my God, I'm thinking about food all the time. I'm thinking about my last meal. I'm thinking about my next meal. This is so common amongst women. Do you see this amongst women who are mainly restricting themselves around food and dieting?
Yes, dieting and restriction are the things that typically contribute to all of those characteristics that you and I were talking about. Um, I'm trying to think. I mean, most of the people that I work with are, if they're not in the current period of restriction, maybe they're in a period of binging, but
Mm,
it's kind of on the tail end of the restriction. Like I believe that binging and restricting are two sides of the same coin. Like you can have one without, you sort of can have one without the other, but not really because of the way the body works. Like if you were in a place of restriction, you're ultimately going to binge. It's just whether it happens at the end of the day or the weekend or maybe in a few weeks or whatever. Like the body is going to try to fight back. And this is what feels like a lack of willpower, a lack of control, all of these things that people start thinking it's their fault is truly your body just like, trying to keep you safe and nourished. So restricting really leads to that contributes to the likelihood of binging. And then after binging, there's a desire to restrict. So one is coming from a desire standpoint, like restricting is coming from what somebody wants to do. Binging is coming from a natural compensatory reaction of the body when it feels out of control. Sometimes it's like a desire, like, oh, I'm going to binge tonight because I've been so good all week. But there's this compulsive out of control feeling that doesn't feel like it's anything that anybody wants to do. It doesn't feel good to binge in that way.
mm. Yet so many women do it. And I can definitely
Yeah.
testify because it's literally bringing you back like 10 years ago, going, oh,
Mhm.
I was in that phase where I was constantly restricting, and then the weekend would come and I would just like go crazy with food. And then Monday would come and then just repeat
Yep.
the cycle. And, you know, unfortunately, unconsciously, I wasn't aware of the behaviors till I did further study, till I got coaching, till I got help. So
Hmm.
this is a perfect example of how disconnected we are between our minds and bodies. And for whoever's listening, this is not a go at you. This is a really nice way of shining a light on something that you haven't been exposed to before. And, you know, if you're dealing with this, maybe this is something to explore a little bit more as well.
Yeah, Siggy, I'm so glad that you just said that for whoever's listening, this isn't a go at them because, when we discuss these disordered behaviors, even the phrase disordered sounds like there's judgment in it. And to be honest, it makes me want to use this is the first time I've really thought about this. I'm like, maybe I can use a different word when I'm talking about this because I don't want anyone to feel judged, you
Mm.
know? And I think one of the things that I hope takes away, if anybody would feel judged, I'm like, no, I did all of this. I did everything that I'm talking about right now. I did all of this when I was struggling. So I've been there and I understand you. Um, and it is not your fault. It is a product of, wellness and diet culture messaging, of the thin ideal, of like societal standards for attractiveness, like so much misinformation about what is healthy and what is not. So I just like want to strongly second what you just said and say that I agree with you that maybe people really haven't been exposed to the fact that like what is normalized is actually disordered or disconnected. Like when you mentioned the mind and body being so disconnected, that also really spoke to me. Um, I started a group program this year and I was trying to think of a name. And I realized that when I was talking with my clients, I started using the phrase body connected like over and over because I'm like, intuitive eating is, I mean, incredible and it's weaved into what I practice all the time. And I think that when people hear intuitive eating, they think either eat whatever you want whenever you want, or like it's never going to be nutritious food again. Or this is what it is, or it's only eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, which it is also not, because no one is a perfect eater.
Yeah.
And we are not going to like either have the opportunity to eat when we're hungry all the time, like because life happens. And we're also maybe not going to want to stop when we're full because food is so tasty. And sometimes you just want to keep going. And like, so I started using, I'm like, it's about becoming, reconnected to your body and being a body connected eater. So I named my group program Body Connected Eating, because it just like really highlights, I think, what we're trying to help people do. Again, like what you and I do is like the body image work and the food relationship work is help the body and the head come back together. One of my clients, we used to talk about her floating head and her body, and now they're one. They've come back together, but she felt so disconnected at first.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful way of explaining it. And hopefully a lot of our listeners are getting these little dots and connecting them together. And you also mentioned a really good myth that you've literally just debunked, is the fact that people think intuitive eating is eating as much as you can, or get as full as possible. And it's just like making us realize it's not actually that fact. It's actually being in tune with your mind and body and developing a healthier relationship. Yet, there's been scenarios, I can speak from my experience, and I'm sure some of our listeners can relate to this, is where you don't have that self-trust in you to know how much to eat and what to eat, because again, you're flooded with information out there going, don't have carbs after 6 p.m., don't eat too much protein, it's going to hurt your kidneys, and like all these things. So it's just like, well, God, no wonder we're so bloody confused. It's because there's so much information coming at us. But as you said, it's finding a practice that works for you and healing that relationship with your restrictive eating. With that saying, what are some practical tips or behaviors that you often recommend for women to drop dieting for good and start establishing a sustainable lifestyle?
Yeah, I love that question, because you hear so much about intuitive eating and like food freedom, and sometimes it's so nuanced. So it's like, and aspirational. So like, how do you actually do this? Like what actions can you take? And the first thing that I often recommend somebody do is stop labeling food as good and bad. I think that's one of the most powerful things that somebody can do early on, because once you stop labeling food as good and bad, it can start to chip away at some of the guilt and shame that comes from eating the foods that you label as bad. And it can help you start to normalize your relationship with food, because if food is no longer bad, that means that it is no longer off limits, which means that if you're eating it right now, you don't believe this is the last time that you're going to eat it again. So you can listen to your body if it's telling you that you're full. You can put it away and have it again tomorrow. You're no longer living in a scarcity mindset. You're and then that's all because you've stopped labeling it as bad, and it doesn't work as neatly as I just described it. But like big picture, this is one of the most like beautiful things that can come from removing these judgments that we put on food, and also practicing the allowance of them. Now, this is something that feels scary at first. So like I want to kind of just share, if anybody is like ready to take action with these things, that it can feel scary. And this is what happened to me too. My therapist was like, start eating dessert. I'm like, okay. And then I started eating dessert like all the time. I'm like, this doesn't feel good. So number one, that's normal. Like if you were going to start eating a food that you weren't eating for a little while, it is very natural to eat more of it, but this is not what your eating is going to look like forever. This is what your eating looks like in the beginning. And eventually it will start to feel normalized for you. So like removing labels, practicing allowance. This is actually following the steps of my ebook. As I say this out loud, I'm like, right, this is why my ebook is built this way. They put these steps in this order. Also, I mean, this is a huge one. No longer checking your weight is a major, major thing that you can do because it starts to break the connection between food and when I say break the connection, I was going to say between food and body. And I know we're trying to be connected to our body, but what I mean is like what we eat doesn't have this enormous impact on our weight and our health in the way that we think it does. And if you can stop lying yourself, then you can start to appreciate food for what it is and not tie it to the effect that it is going to have on your body or on the scale. Another really big thing I recommend is this is specific, but it's important. Purchasing clothes that fit your current body, or moving the clothes of, away from the front of your closet that don't currently fit your body and kind of just keeping the ones that do, because that way you're not having a reminder in a given moment of maybe what a body used to be or what you want your body to be. And it feels so much more comfortable and quiets the negative body image voices. So definitely wearing comfortable clothes. And I mean, exercise is another big thing to think about, like looking at your relationship with exercise, noticing if you are exercising to earn or compensate for food, to fix the bad body image day, because that's not going to work. Try to find the joy in movement and think about things that you just like to do. Even think about what you did as a kid, like other things you enjoyed as a kid that you don't do anymore, and start to untangle exercise from what your body looks like and more about how it makes you feel as well.
Mm.
I could go on, but those are some big ones. I'm gonna,
I know.
leave
And
it there.
they're so useful. And I'm like in the background here and like nodding my head going, yes.
Yeah.
And it's so, again, it's no coincidence why we're talking here today, because it's bringing up a lot of memories from when I used to restrict ice cream. So when I went through my restrictive phase, it would be Monday to Friday, clean eating, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And Friday night will come and I would just binge on a liter of ice cream. In my eyes, I was just like, oh, this is normal. This is my cheat meal. But it was going on for years and years till I was able to heal that. However, then, as you mentioned, when we restrict a certain food and we're able to bring it back into our lives, we tend to either overcompensate for it. So having it every night or, twice an hour, whatever. And I noticed doing that with ice cream. I would buy
Mm-hmm.
ice cream cones and I would have it every night. And my motto would be, don't skip dessert. But unconsciously, I was just like, what's happening here right now? Because I'm reverting from one restricting to an overcompensation of something that I've missed so much. So it's so interesting for us to have this conversation, for people to realize maybe they're doing these practices right now, and to see like what changes they need to make or what steps they need to take further to change that relationship with food.
I think that some of the things you just mentioned are also things that people don't talk about when it comes to healing. Because, I mean, first of all, I'm like, are you telling my story? Like, literally what you just said. I'm like, this sounds exactly like me, between the cheat day and the weekend binging. And then also, you were making me think of the fact. So, like, my homework when I started working with my dietitian was to have dessert once a day. It was like this prescription that I willingly, excitedly, it was like, okay, cool. Like, I've been told forever that you can't have dessert, and now my dietitian's like, have it once a day. I think that I had dessert every single day without fail for well over a year. Sometimes twice a day. Like, lunch dessert is really big for me. Like, I love something sweet after lunch. But I remember there was one day that I questioned having dessert at night, because I was like, do I actually want it right now? Or has it become a habit to help me heal my, it was a necessary behavior. It probably was necessary for over a year, to be honest. But like, there was one day where I finally questioned whether I actually wanted it. And that was like I just remember that really well. I'm like, this is the first day that I haven't had dessert, because I realized I was having it to make up for, to come back from that restriction. Um, yes, I just remember that moment clearly. There was that kind of like there's a reaction to restriction, it can look really different for different people, but I know that was something I remember.
There's always like significant moments in the journey where you look back and you're like, oh, this is how far I've come and this is what I'm doing right now. And it's, again, as we mentioned before, it's not having a go at anyone. It's actually a really cool way of exploring like how far you've come and what habits are you placing in life right now. Because are you masking the old problem into a new problem, or are you actually healing that relationship with yourself and with food? In your experience, Nicole, what is the most significant impact you've seen in women who have achieved a truly healthy relationship with food?
I think the relationship with the body is one of the biggest, and quality of life. These are the two things. Um, there's a sense of confidence in oneself that I see, like working with somebody in the beginning towards the end. They just feel more connected to who, and this I think connects to both the quality of life and the body image piece, like feeling stronger in who they are as a person, feeling confident in who they are, um, feeling less anxious in general, feeling more, feeling like their life has been opened up now for other things. Like there's room in their life to enjoy things because they are no longer obsessing about food and their body. Um, and then specifically with the body image, like there is confidence in people that I've seen skyrocket in a way that they never thought would be possible because they were at war with their bodies for such a long time and thinking that they needed to change it for so many years, that whether their bodies changed or not, like I've worked with people whose bodies have changed in one direction or another, or who haven't really changed much at all. But independent of the change, there is a change in the body image. Um, and that is one of the most significant things, because like when we can be more comfortable in the bodies that we literally live in every second of every day, like that is a huge gift and a huge freedom as well.
Having that freedom is so important. Again, it like goes back to that restriction in food. If we feel restricted with food, we're going to feel restricted by the way we look, by the way we see ourselves, by the way we feel. And most women
Yeah.
don't, it's not that they don't take that into consideration. They're not consciously aware of it. Again, it could be because of the beauty standards. It could be from previous experiences with their guardians, their parents, like taking on older habits and patterns. But it's such a
Yeah.
cool way of being able to break through that.
Yeah. And do you feel like with the people you work with, like the biggest changes that you see for them, do you feel like they're similar, or are there other things that you feel like are, I don't know, the biggest changes?
It's definitely similar around the body image, 100%.
Hmm.
Yeah. And too often, once I'm able to shine that light and make them realize, hey, like there was actually never an issue with food, it's how you perceive yourself.
Yeah.
And then it's like this light bulb moment going, oh, wow, like I've been carrying this for so long and I actually thought it was my food, but it's actually the perception of myself. It's how I perceive
Yes.
myself, how I see myself. And I'm like, yes, this is where the work starts.
Yeah. And with that, I think one of the other biggest changes that I just thought of as we were talking about this is the joy that that food has again. Like, being able to eat foods and have it not have the meaning that it used to, of like the guilt and the shame and the bad, like all of that, that food finally fits into people's lives again in a way that feels like at minimum neutral, like we're no longer value judging it anymore. And then even more like wonderful, like enjoying food again and finding favorite foods, and also letting go of diet foods that they thought they liked before, but no longer, but don't actually like, and being able to like really find the joy in food again.
Speaking of diet foods, I remember going through a phase of eating zoodles. I don't know if that's in the States, but
Yes,
yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. All right.
yes.
Yeah, there will be a stage where I would just pack as many zoodles into my bolognese because I restrict myself from actually having pasta. And funnily enough, last night I made myself a big dish of pasta and prawns and some like vegetables. And now that I'm thinking about it, going, oh wow, like I've come such a long way, knowing that I don't have to deplete myself by having zoodles where I can actually just have the real fucking food.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that like such a cool moment when in your current like healed life, you really have this sharp memory of like, oh wow, like what this would have been. Like I'm sitting here making, which by the way, that sounds amazing, like very impressive, the dinner that you made last night. um, that you can do that with peace and enjoyment now, and how you would not have been able to do that in the past. It's like, and I think that for anybody who has healed and anybody now who's thinking about doing so, um, it I think always stays in your life in some way. Like it doesn't, it's nothing you'll ever forget. Like you'll remember the ways that you've struggled. Every so often, maybe a little former voice of the past might come up, but which by the way, it's like okay and normal and doesn't mean that you're backsliding or that you haven't healed. Like we can't ever forget everything that we've experienced, but it's how you respond to it that I think significantly changes. Like you might have a little, old voice pop up, but you can quiet it much more quickly. You don't listen to it anymore. So that was a little tangent, but as I was talking about ways that this kind of sticks with you throughout life, I thought of that and wanted to mention it. But I think another way is like I actually just happened to me last night. Literally, I made pasta last night as well. Um, but for me, this was like my second dinner. I'd like eaten something at one time and then like was getting ready for bed and thought I was about to get into bed, but my stomach started growling. So I made more pasta and chicken sausage and stuff at like 11:30 at night. Um, and felt so strongly connected to my body in that moment because I let it lead the way entirely. And like former me would never have eaten, oil and carbs and chicken sauce, a meal at a second dinner at 11:30 p.m. Like there was absolutely no way. Because my mind was running the show. And now my body is the one that tells me, often like, hey, this is what you need right now. And it was a moment of appreciation that I had even now, years out of working with my therapist and dietitian. There's still something that feels so good when you have these like wins because you remember how hard it used to be.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful way of looking at it. And this is something that I always remind my clients when they think they're going backwards or they've slipped up or done something that their old self would have done. I'm like, this is a win right now. You're actually consciously aware of the old patterns and you're able to pick up on what's happening. So you like the ball is in your court. You can either choose to go back to those old habits, or right now you have this self-awareness, which has made you such a strong, like grown woman to realize, oh, those choices didn't really serve me back then. Let's change these and continue that journey.
Yes, I love that so, so much. Like the awareness and the consciousness, that's where it comes back to that body connection,
Mm,
right? Like we are recognizing what our body is saying. We're hearing a thought in our mind. Now we are aware of that thought, whereas previously those thoughts used to be like just autopilot, what runs the show. And then the phrase that you also used about like something that doesn't serve me anymore. And I love that language too, because it's non-judgmental,
yeah.
right? Like it's not a bad behavior. Maybe not even, let's even, I mentioned before the word disordered, how that can kind of sound judgmental. Let's not even call it a disordered behavior. Let's just say it's something that doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve my relationship with food and my body. It doesn't serve the path that I, want to continue to go down. I think that's such a great way of putting it.
It's so great. And I'm really glad that we have been able to like debunk a lot of these myths around this. And again, like show women that it's doable
Mhm.
as long as you're wanting to put the work in and you're knowing that the rut that you're stuck in right now, there is a way out. Even though I remember the time where I was stuck in there, I just thought, oh, this is my life right now. I'm just going to accept it as it is. However, there's always going to be a certain point in your life where you're like, oh, actually, this is showing me a way that I can lead it differently and healthier too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So many people that I work with can relate to what you just said. I know because they have said to me, like, I can't imagine things being different. Um, they just can't imagine they're like being able to live in a way that isn't the way that they're living now. That's this like kind of um understandably not entirely optimistic outlook on like can things actually change for me? And similarly, I'm like they really can. Like, and it's gonna take time, and it's not an overnight fix like all the diets you've been on before. Like this is going to be sometimes uncomfortably slow and you're going to just like want to jump to the finish line. But that is why this works, because it takes time and we are uncovering like everything about every thought and belief and every internalized belief that you have about food in your body. Like we are going to talk about some like really hard shit. Um, and like smash it down, like smash down everything that you have been taught about food in your body throughout maybe your entire life. Um, so that way it doesn't rule you anymore. And like that's where so much of the behavior change comes in once you can start to question everything that you've been taught.
Mm, I agree with everything that you just said.
Yeah. I agreed with everything you just said before it. I'm like, yes, like that is so powerful about the ability to make these changes. It really, um, even if you being the listener, like truly doesn't believe that you can make these changes, you are not alone in that feeling. And I think both Siggy and I are incredibly confident that you can by, with the right support and work.
Definitely. 110, even 20%. It's, like,
Million.
yeah, exactly. Like if we can do it, literally anyone can do it. I truly
Yeah.
believe that. Um, Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been such a eye opener and also like what's the word I'm looking for? A a journey for myself as well.
Mm.
Because I've just realized like how much I've overcome, how much you've overcome, and giving our listeners a lot of practical ways for them to heal their relationship with themselves.
Thank you. I enjoyed this conversation so much. I feel inspired by it, talking about, the ways that people can heal, hearing the ways that you've healed, again, reminiscing myself, on the ways that I've healed. So I'm feeling really inspired right now. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak today.
Thank you. And girls, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you screenshot it, tag us, and let us know what you think of it. And let us know where you're at on your healing journey as well.
Love that. Amazing. I'm excited to see what people say.